Welcome everybody to a brand new video. No gameplay in the background of today's video. I kind of just want to talk about a topic that came up recently and it sort of struck a chord with me. I just wanted to talk about it because I had some opinions on it. I'm not going to beat around the bush. The thing I want to talk about today is the whole Drake situation, what happened at Tyler's festival where Drake came on and he was performing a few songs. And there was a significant portion of the crowd that ended up booing him off stage. Now, before we dive any deeper into this, I want to quickly mention that I'm not like the biggest Drake fan in the world. I like some of his older material, some of his older albums like Take Care, the If You're Reading This, It's Too Late mixtape. I enjoyed a little bit of Views as well. I forgot to mention Nothing Was the Same. Actually quite like that project. But recently speaking, I don't feel like he's been putting out the best material ever. I don't think he's the greatest artist ever. I do think he is one of the most influential rap artists ever, but in terms of music and in terms of whether or not my musical palette enjoys a shit ton of Drake, it's not really the case. I mean, I respect him as an artist, but I'm not the biggest Drake fan in the world, in case you guys are wondering. So I'm not like going into this with any sort of bias towards Drake. You know, I'm not gonna blindly defend him or anything like that. However, I do want to give my opinions on the whole festival, and I only have a few points to make. First of all, I just want to say that even though I'm not the biggest Drake fan in the world, him getting booed off stage really just wasn't warranted, in my opinion. I feel like he just did not deserve that whatsoever. I mean, at the end of the day, right, when we have to really think about it, Drake is still a person. He's not any better than me or you. Yeah, he's a celebrity and he's got like more money than the majority of, people. But at the end of the day, I still feel like he deserves a level of respect that goes with any guest that would show up at that festival. And I don't give a shit if he was named on the fucking Billboard advertisement thing or if he wasn't, if he was the surprise guest. I'm hearing that a big reason why this happened is because people wanted to see Frank Ocean instead of seeing Drake, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. If you were expecting Frank Ocean and you saw Drake and you were a little bit disappointed, that's fine. However, I think it's a little bit different when you give into a crowd mentality where a shit ton of people are booing, and so you decide to start booing, and it becomes this really nasty environment. By no means did Drake, in my opinion, deserve that type of treatment. Yeah, he's a little bit corny, and he's not, like, the greatest person in the world. I'm not gonna sit here and say that, the guy hasn't done some fucked up things in the past, but he's still a person. He wanted to put on a good show, and from what I saw, some of the songs he was performing were not that bad. They were some of his bigger hits. Yeah, there were a few songs in there that weren't hits. They were specific songs that Tyler wanted him to perform, and that's fine. It's Tyler's festival after all. I just don't exactly get why people would boo Drake when obviously he's there because Tyler wanted him to be there. If you're a Tyler fan and you're booing Drake off stage at his own festival, then how are you representing Tyler in any sort of way? Clearly Drake is there because Tyler wanted him to be there if it's Tyler's festival, which it was. The next thing I want to mention is just how polite Drake was. It really seemed like he handled this whole situation so well. Most of us definitely wouldn't have been able to take that amount of heat on stage. And I'm not going to sit here and say that everybody in the crowd was booing him, because absolutely that is not the case. I've looked at the footage myself. You can barely even hear people booing, but they were there. There were a decent amount of people who were booing him, who didn't want to see him on there. Some people were saying that they wanted to see Frank and, they should get him off the stage and stuff, and it wasn't too nice. But I don't want to come out here and say that everybody was booing him. It was just a significant portion of the crowd. But again, I like how professional he was with the whole situation. The way he was so polite in asking the crowd if they want him to continue. Maybe some people would see that as like, weakness or whatever, but in my opinion, it just shows a level of maturity out of Drake. Instead of him just, going off on the crowd, talking shit about them and, kind of making himself look like an ass, he just handled the whole thing really well, and yeah, I gotta give him big props for that. He definitely handled the situation more maturely than a lot of the people in the crowd. Speaking of the crowd, let's get on to the way people acted and my opinions on that. I don't necessarily know if this whole thing was started because of Frank Ocean. Obviously, not Frank Ocean himself. I'm just talking about the fan base. I'm not going to sit here and say that this was all because people wanted to see Frank Ocean. There's also some other reasons people are bringing up, like the fact that he was on stage too long and stuff like that. Another thing I want to bring up is that I am not going to sit here and just point the finger at Frank Ocean fans and claim that they're a toxic fan base or like they're one of the worst fan bases in the world, because I just personally don't see the point in doing that. I personally don't see a reason to point fingers at other fan bases and say that this is why the Frank Ocean fan base is toxic, or any sort of fan base for that matter. I think it's just a waste of energy, because to me, it's an overgeneralization. To go out and say that all Frank Ocean fans are toxic and this is exactly why is just ignorant in my opinion. And yeah, you should not have that sort of mentality in your mind, because it's so easy to point at any fan base and point out certain people who do certain toxic things and then just say, oh, you know, the entire fan base is like this, the entire fan base is toxic. I actually brought this up when I was talking to her about it yesterday, and that I'm sort of coming from the standpoint of an Eminem fan, and while yeah, that probably does have some influence around it, but one thing I absolutely hate is when I talk about anything related to Eminem and quote-unquote hip-hop heads who know anything about hip-hop will come at me and say that my fan base is toxic and I have no idea about anything to do with hip-hop. And it's really unfair. You know, it's an overgeneralization that just because I like Eminem, I am all of a sudden, you know, a stan or I'm toxic or something like that. So I don't feel that it's right to treat other people in that sort of way. With that being said, though, the people who did take these actions and boo Drake off stage, I'm not exactly letting them off the hook. One thing I do want to mention is that regardless of the whole like toxic fan base mentality and all this shit, don't represent yourself or the fan base in that way. While me personally, I won't go as far as to name an entire fan base toxic, there are people who don't think the same way that I do, and I'm not saying that they're any worse or any better in thinking any differently than I do, but what I want to bring up is that there are people who will judge the entire fan base based off of a small group of people's actions, or a big group, it doesn't exactly matter. When you take actions like this, when you boo someone off stage because you want Frank Ocean to come on, people will associate that with toxicity. It's just how it is. Personally, I don't. I just think each individual person who did that is kind of a fucking asshole. But if you are so pissed off of people calling your fan base toxic, don't act like an asshole. Represent the artist that you like in a respectable manner, because when you do things like this, when you boo an artist like Drake off stage because you don't like him and you demand that Frank Ocean comes on stage instead of him, you make not only yourself look like an idiot, but you also make the fan base that you're trying to represent look bad, because, as I said, people are going to judge a fan base based off of that. And I'm not just saying this about Frank Ocean fans. Some Frank Ocean fans might watch this video and say, who the fuck are you to say anything? You're an Eminem fan. And that goes back to the unfair bias in my opinion. But this goes to any fan base in my opinion. You know, I do believe that a good portion of Eminem's fan base should, you know, be a little bit more accepting of other people's opinions when, you know, they say that Eminem isn't the greatest of all time. You know, you should listen a little bit more. You have two ears and one mouth. You should use them proportionally. But basically, what I'm trying to get at is, don't represent Frank Ocean in that way. I'm sure that Frank Ocean isn't happy about all of this. If you love Frank Ocean so much, or if you love your artist so much, and you take actions like this, boo Drake off stage, think to yourself, the artist that you're supporting, do you think that they are supporting the actions that you're taking? Do you think Frank Ocean wanted you to boo Drake off stage? I assume not. It's incredibly disrespectful, and in a way, it makes him look bad, because people are just going to assume that the entire fan base is like this, and they won't want to listen to Frank Ocean as a result, and that's not a good thing. If you support an artist so much, then you should do whatever you can to spread the fact that you love that artist so much in a positive way, and spread the word of his music in a positive way, not by booing Drake off stage. That doesn't make anybody want to check out the artist that you like. Instead, that just makes people want to move away from him as much as possible. They don't want to listen to music from an artist whose fan base are a bunch of people that you don't want to associate yourself with. Of course, I don't personally think like this. I will probably dive into Frank Ocean's discography at some point and stay separate from the fan base itself, but unfortunately not everybody is like that, as I said earlier in this video. I don't want to harp on that point a little bit too much, but the final point that I want to make is just being grateful. I mean, I get that maybe you're not the biggest Drake fan in the world. However, I can acknowledge that Drake has had a huge influence over so many artists this generation, and he is a pretty great artist overall when we're talking about his career. While I'm not a big fan of him and his recent work, I definitely can appreciate a person like Drake. If he came up on stage, I would honestly feel honored to be in that guy's presence. The fact that I got to see him in person, I would be grateful personally, even though I don't like his music all that much. I get it, you're disappointed that the artist that you wanted to come on didn't come on, but where's the gratitude? Say for example, if I went to, I don't know, any fucking concert and an artist came on that I didn't personally like, I would still feel grateful that they were there, because it's still pretty cool to have an artist as big as Drake up on stage and I'm fucking witnessing it. And if I didn't like it, if I truly didn't want to be there, if I just despised Drake and hated the fact that he was on stage, I'd probably go for like a toilet break or something, or go get something to drink or some shit. I don't fucking know. Anything but booing that person off stage. It's just so rude. When you get Drake on stage and you boo him off because you want Frank Ocean, it's the equivalent of getting, I don't know, like an iPhone 8 for your birthday, but smashing it on the ground and saying, fuck you, I want an iPhone 10 or iPhone 11, whatever the newest iPhone is. I don't know. I have a fucking iPhone 6S. It makes you look really entitled, and that's not the look you want to have. I'm hoping that some people listened to what I'm saying. I'm not trying to talk down to anybody, and I'm not just shitting on anybody who was at the festival and, you know, booed Drake off stage, but more so just listen to what I'm saying, absorb it, and improve as a person based off of what I'm saying. I'm not trying to pretend as if like I'm some sort of preacher or something like that, like I'm better than you, I know better than you, but you know, take on what other people are saying and apply it to your life, or don't. It's up to you. You know, you're your own individual and you can make your own decisions, but I don't know. I just personally feel, in my own opinion, that booing someone like Drake off stage is just really rude, and he didn't deserve it, in my opinion. But anyway, I feel like I've talked about this topic enough. I'm gonna wrap this video up here. So yeah, guys, that's pretty much the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed, make sure you smack the like button. If you want to stay up to date on my content, please be sure to subscribe. I'll have my last video in the corner. If you haven't checked that out already, definitely make sure to check it out. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks very much for watching. Peace out.